Let me give you a handful of examples of people who had similar experiences happen to them, meaning that they did something, reaped the harvest from it, but they didn't get bitter. You ready? Abraham with Ishmael. Do you realize that Abraham's seed is still today paying the price for his move with Ishmael? Yes, sir. Yep. Meaning whenever God had given Abraham and Sarah a promise, I'm going to give you a son, and from that son will come the promised seed, the nation of Israel itself. Well, they got a little bit worried. He's getting older, wasn't a young man. And so Sarah and him cook up this concocted idea. You know what? Go on into Hagar, Sarah said, my handmaiden, and let's go ahead and get this promised seed business going. So he did. Next thing you know, he goes into Hagar. Hagar has a son. They name him Ishmael. And then what do you know? A few years later, Sarah gets to expecting. Just exactly what God said would happen, right? Well, you know the story well. Isaac's born into the family, and it ain't long at all. Ishmael starts giving Isaac a hard time, causing turmoil and strife in the family. God speaks up and says, Hagar and Ishmael got to go. Abraham had to walk his son Ishmael and the handmaiden out of the land, out of the camp, put him on the go. Now, do you think that broke his heart? Sure it did. He was as much of Ishmael's father as he was Isaac's. Okay? Can I say this? He could have got bitter at God about it. But he didn't. Why would you? You did that yourself. God didn't deceive you and tell you to go into Hagar, then punish you for doing it. Oh, no. You stepped out of the arena of faith into the arena of human reasoning, and you did that yourself. And so now you had to pay the consequences, and he did. And so have generations to follow him. Remember David in the Bible, King David? Remember that child he had that the Lord took from him? As a result of David being the conspirator to a adultery and murder. Now, some people would say, or some people would get bitter at God for taking the child. David didn't. He fasted and he worshiped, hoping that that would salvage the child's life. But the Lord took the child anyway. Was that God's fault? It was David's. And David knew it. So when it was over with, no need to be mad at God. David gets up, goes right back to serving the Lord. See, that's why in our society we have a theology problem. Here's our theology problem. We're God, and He serves us. He exists to give us what we want in this life. He's there to make my life the way I want it. If you do what I want you to do, I will worship you. The moment you don't, I stop. Because I'm not here to serve you, God. You're there to serve me. That's the theology of our society. It's warped and backwards and upside down, but it is what it is. Take Solomon, for example. In the Bible, if you really study the writings of Solomon, by the time you get to the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon's outlook on life is vanity of vanities. It's all vanity. Life is not even worth living. Now, he said that because he was a man that had chosen his flesh over his spiritual heritage, and by the time he gets to the end of life, after living in it and indulging in it for all of his days, he finds out it is empty and worthless. We should learn. Let me ask you a question. Was it God's fault that Solomon didn't follow the faith of his father David and build a spiritual heritage for his children? No, it wasn't God's fault. God didn't tell him, marry all those women and those concubines. That ain't what God told him to do. That's what he did on his own. So when he got to the end of his days and he had nothing spiritually to turn loose on the next generation, nobody to blame but himself. The Apostle Paul's another example of somebody who faced hardship in life probably because of what he had sowed but didn't get bitter toward God about it. Now, before he was saved, Paul was a persecutor of the church. After he got saved, listen to me closely, he was persecuted because of his love for the church and his service to the church. And not one time did he get mad or bitter at God about it. Why? Because really I think his theology was, I'm just reaping what I sowed. What they're doing to me is what I was doing to them before I got saved. Prodigal son's another good picture of somebody who brought what come on him in his life on himself. You know the story well. Father, give me my inheritance. He did. He run down there, blew it. Famine come up. Now he's eating with the hogs. I'm going to go home. Man, I hope my daddy will hire me to be a hired hand, not a son, but a servant. That's all. I just want to be a servant again, right? And they got it better off than I got it now. And so he goes back home, and not one time did he ask his dad for anything. And he was not bitter because at his dad for the blowing of the inheritance, because he had to leave home. See, here's what would happen in modern context. In the modern context, people today be, give me my inheritance, go in there and blow it, and then still be fussing at their mom and daddy. Well, I had to leave because the way they wouldn't let me do what I want to do. They wouldn't let me live how I want to live, so I had to go down there. Look what it cost me. I blew my whole inheritance because of them. You didn't deserve the inheritance to start with. Right? See, it matters how you process it. You process it right, and you'll find very, very little of a victim mentality in the society that we're living in. But as you know as well as I do, the way people process stuff today, don't we live in a society full of victims? I mean, just victims everywhere. Beats all I've ever seen. Can't wait till Jesus rescues all these victims. I got a sneaky suspicion by what we're going to find out here in a minute, though, that there's a lot of them that think they're victims going to get before God and find out you wouldn't.